Okay, let's talk about high blood pressure. First, let's talk about why we care about all this. What's the big picture here, and why are we always obsessing with these numbers? If your blood pressure runs high over several years and the magic number seems to be above 140 on the top or 90 on the bottom, this causes your blood vessels to get damaged and they start to narrow. So this is like if you were to take a garden hose and squeeze it in the middle, the water barely comes out the other end, right? Well, you've got a lot of these tiny, fragile blood vessels like garden hoses in the back part of your brain and in your eyes and in your heart. So when these blood vessels start to narrow, there's less blood that gets to your brain and to your heart and to your eyes. When those vessels completely clog up, well, that's what causes a stroke or a heart attack right there. So that's why we care about all this. I'm trying to prevent you from becoming one of those people who suddenly die of a stroke or a heart attack at an early age. It's also worth mentioning that having high blood pressure that's not being treated for decades and decades leads to heart failure. As it becomes harder and harder for the heart to push the blood through your narrowed blood vessels, the heart gets bigger and bigger, and eventually it can't squeeze as effectively as before, and the result is heart failure with symptoms like extreme swelling of the legs, shortness of breath, and sudden weight gain. Now I want to take a second to focus on what happens in your eyes. In your eyes, you have a lot of very fragile blood vessels in the back part of your eye in a place called the retina. When your blood pressure gets high, these things will actually start to explode, kind of like a water balloon that's been overfilled. So a lot of people think that the reason that their vision gets worse over time is just because they're getting older. But for people with high blood pressure, it's probably because of this issue. That's why it's so important for you to be seen by an ophthalmologist once a year. An ophthalmologist is an MD eye doctor. They have special machines that look in the back part of your eye, and they can see this happening and can fix it before it gets really out of control. Okay, the last thing I'm going to touch on is checking blood pressures at home. So in general, I like to have people check their blood pressures at home. And one way to do this is to buy a blood pressure cuff. The other way to do it, if you can't afford a blood pressure cuff or feel like you can't operate it, would be to go to a place like Walmart or Kroger or anywhere that has one of those automatic blood pressure cuffs and just use theirs. I generally would want you to log your blood pressures so that I have something to compare our numbers to. This really helps me to fine-tune your medicine and to make sure that we're not giving you too much blood pressure medicine. If you do check your blood pressures at home, you need to be sitting down and in a restful state before you check your pressure. Don't check it right after you've exercised or if you're really stressed out. Try to have your arm relaxed and supported by something like a table or an armrest of a chair. Also, I'd prefer you check your pressure at some point in the early afternoon if you can, between like noon and supper time. Okay, the last thing, and this is important. In general, I don't ever want you to take your blood pressure medicine at night right before you go to sleep. The reason I say this is because naturally, when you fall asleep at night, your blood pressure will fall about 20 points or more when you go to sleep. So if you take a blood pressure medicine right before you go to sleep, this can actually cause your blood pressure to drop really low, and there's a risk that it might go too low while you're sleeping. When that happens, your brain is not getting enough blood pumped to it. So ideally, you want to take your blood pressure medication in the morning so that it can be working all day when your blood pressure is at the highest. If you're on blood pressure medicine that needs to be taken twice a day, like in the morning and in the evening, take the first one when you wake up and take the second one around 4:30 or 5. Okay, that's the important stuff that you need to know about blood pressure. Hope that was helpful.